Welcome back to Bookish Brits. My name is Michelle and hello! I know I've been absent a bit. I'm really working hard to try to make that less of a thing coming up. We shall see. But I found it really interesting watching Rosie's video recently in which she's talked about her not reading lately because of everything going on and how she has turned to graphic novels to fill this hole that reading has left for her. And I was watching it and it really spoke to me because that's kind of what I've been going through lately myself. Obviously I have a lot going on in terms of my dad's declining health at the moment, and that has really brought me down lately. It's meant that I don't really feel like I can concentrate very much on books. I pick up quite a few lately and I'm enjoying the books when I'm reading them, but as soon as I put them down again I have no motivation to pick them back up. Very few things are holding my interest lately, and it just feels like such a black hole in my life, and it feels like it affects every part of my life when I'm not reading. So I do my best to pick up certain things, to try new things. I try flipping between genres and reading outside of my comfort zone. I've tried reading comfort books. I've tried switching up the format that I'm reading, ebooks, audiobooks, those sort of things. Nothing is helping lately. And then I was talking to a friend and he recommended some poetry, and it started off with just, remember that great poem by Pablo Neruda, and I ended up getting really excited. Yes, I love Pablo Neruda, I love his poetry, and then it turned into, well, what about this one? And he recommended this amazing poem by Charles Bukowski called Bluebird, and that led on to other recommendations. I find that poetry is exactly what I need right now. The poems themselves are generally quite short, so I don't have to concentrate a great deal on finishing it. They're usually incredibly emotional, at least the poems that I've been reading lately. And reading poetry just makes me fall in love all over again with words and language. As I'm reading the poetry and I'm thinking, that was a great turn of phrase, or the fact that word is used, or even just marveling at how so much can be said in so few words. I just wanted to talk a little bit about poetry today, if you don't mind. As I've said, I've been reading a lot of Pablo Neruda lately. I absolutely adore him. Charles Bukowski is a complete revelation, I think. I kind of always thought of him as quite a pretentious writer, and I think I always had some sort of idea in my head of what his poetry or stories or anything would be about, and then I read some of his poetry, and while I don't get on with everything that he's written, so much of the poetry that I've read by him is pretty amazing. I've also gone back to some of my favorite poems. I love E. Cummings' I Carry Your Heart. I can't read Still I Rise by Maya Angelou without getting a little bit teary and choked up. The book that I've been reading lately is actually Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman, and this was a collection of poetry that I read in high school, and I think that when I read it I was reading it just for the sake of reading it. I don't think I appreciated Walt Whitman in high school, and as I'm reading it as an adult, looking again at the way that he writes and how much emotion that he puts into his poetry, I just find it amazing and inspirational. In fact, there's so much of Leaves of Grass is very much a celebration of the body and people and life and love, and it's incredibly sensual and spiritual all at the same time, and I love it. I feel like when I'm reading it I want to be more appreciative of myself and my place in the world. And I just love that about Leaves of Grass. It's such a mood lifter for me, so that on a really crappy day when things are really tough, to just pull out my Kindle app where I've downloaded an ebook copy of Leaves of Grass, and I read a couple of poems, and I feel kind of like his words lift me up in this way. And I know I'm getting incredibly cheesy about this poetry, but that's what it makes me feel, and I love the power of poetry to do that for me. I don't think that this is a new thing at all. I think I've always been interested in poetry. The first time I really noticed poetry is when I came across Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost in The Outsiders, and it made me sit up and take notice of poetry at that point. And I remember falling in love with both that poem in the book and also some other poetry by Robert Frost. And I love that it does that. I really love when poetry is included in books. I think it was Delirium. Is it Delirium, in which all the poetry and literature and art is limited to just the 100. And anyway, in the book, Dylan Thomas's Rage Against the Dying of the Light is mentioned, and I just found it to be absolutely incredible. But there's other books. There's other books like verse novels, which are incredible. And every time I read a verse novel, I always think to myself, why aren't I reading more poetry? I particularly I love Ellen Hopkins, who writes so many incredible sort of issue books in a verse format. Recently I discovered Sarah Crossan, who I find incredible as well. The Weight of Water was amazing, and one left me in this sobbing wreck of a person afterwards. But also her books that are not told in verse, like Apple and Rain, have such a wonderful inclusion of poetry and how powerful and important words and poetry can be. So this is kind of a rambling video in which I talk about my love of poetry and sort of bounce all over the place. But I just wanted to say that that's where I'm at in terms of reading right now. Definitely send me your recommendations, I guess, for individual poems, I suppose, more so than a collection, unless I can just download it freely. I've been reading quite a lot of things on a website called poemhunter.com, in which it has a list of different well-rated, I guess, well-loved poems by poets, and I'm kind of reading through them slowly. I'm picking my way here and there to the names and the titles of poems that I like, and just choosing whatever. I saw that there was a listing there of Margaret Atwood's poems, and I thought to myself, hey, I like her stories. Well, I like her poetry, and it turns out yes, I do. I think I'm going to be reading a little bit more of Sylvia Plath coming up soon, and maybe some Emily Dickinson, even though I think that Emily Dickinson kind of intimidates me a little bit with all of her dashes. What do you do during a reading slump when you can't concentrate and you can't read and nothing else is working? Do you turn to poetry? Have you ever considered poetry as a form of beating a book reading slump? To be honest, I hadn't before this now, but do love that I've just discovered something so beautiful right at a time when I really need it. Thank you so much for watching and putting up with all of my cheesiness during this video, and hopefully it won't be very long before I see you again. So take care, goodbye, see you next time.